Two
Ask.
guys drinking beer in a near broken down porch. Like, okay, where are we going here? Once you commit, things show up to support that activity. The most important thing about interviewing is listening.
Welcome to Talent Freaks with Andy Cohn. I'm Andy, a filmmaker and photographer based in the Bay Area of California. This podcast delves into the journeys of creative individuals who inspire curiosity and impact through their work. And if you enjoy the show, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell. And share it with friends. It really helps us grow and brings more inspiring guests your way. Now, today's guest is Jonathan Berman, an acclaimed documentary filmmaker and professor at Cal State San Marcos in North San Diego. He's a director of Commune, which chronicles iconic Black Bear Ranch and was recently restored for its 20th anniversary. Jonathan's work dives deep into the themes of alternative living, community, and activism. Let's meet Jonathan. Jonathan Berman, welcome to Talent Freaks. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Andy.
So one of the things that, when Kelly reached out to me about, connecting with you, one of the things that interests me was, my background as a documentary filmmaker. And how did you get interested, or how did you get into this story? How was it first introduced to you?
Well, what happened was I was making a film about barbecue in the Carolinas, or I was developing one. And what happened was I pitched that idea to a philanthropist. And he said, no, I'm not interested in that, but I am interested in stuff that's off the grid. So I said, oh, off the grid. So went out and looked that up and found out about this place called the Black Bear Ranch, because they all wrote a book together called Free Land, Free Love, Tales from a Wilderness Commune, and by Don Monkrud. I see that it's a real collector's item now. But just reading their stories, I was like, this is the place. We just got to go deep on this one place rather than doing some kind of survey. But always better to go deeper in one than wide, I feel, for story purposes.
And how did you get into all the archival footage? That's a big part of this documentary, is all the footage from the, prior to you doing this.
Right. Well, there was that thing that's attributed to, who was it? The guy who climbed Everest. And he said, once you commit, things show up to support that activity. So we committed to making the film, and stuff showed up. We found out that there was, talking. It's like in the olden days. Let me tell you, kids. In the olden days, it used to be very word of mouth society. Now it's more like social media, I guess, where you find stuff out. But people would talk to each other, right? Refreshing idea. So a lot of people from the ranch were talking to me, and Elsa said to me, oh, there was a guy who was traveling around with a really early video, one of the first video cameras, and he was doing kind of like a Western Union, like you'd send a message to your friend at another commune in Colorado, and he would take his van and drive it there and then show him that footage. Reminiscent of the early days of cinema, when they would shoot a movie in a town and show it in the town that night. So that footage is in the film. That's the black and white Portapack footage. And when we first got it, it was like 40 hours and amazing stuff of indigenous American people, and very little black bear, like almost nothing. So we were a little bummed out at that point. And then we realized, wait a minute, these 10 minutes, wait, that person is that person. This is Cedar at 20, and now we see him at 50. And this is Elsa at 25. And, so really, that really helped a lot. Some of the other footage is from Milestones, the color 16 millimeter, crazy footage of blowing the shofar, the ram's horn, and running down to the river, and the footage of the naked acupuncture. That's from a film by a really early avant-garde filmmaker named Robert Kramer. And that was a funny story, because the only place I could find it was at MoMA, Museum of Modern Art. Oh, I hope I don't lose my membership now. Don't tell anyone, but we pretended we were a film society. If you ask somebody wants to know what producing is, this is producing. So I made up a letterhead for a film society. We rented the film because that's the only way we could get it. for a screening, and we transferred it immediately to the best videotape of the day. And so that's milestones. And then the other thing was Jeff Buchin, who was a member of Black Bear, had a fastidious archive he kept of all the photos. He's a photographer, and basically was Black Bear's archivist. So that's a lot of the great photos. And finally, Newsreel, which is now I think California Newsreel. It's an early revolutionary film organization, activist organization, and they had that footage from the Democratic Convention, and we saw Osha Newman in there. So at that point, I think I still had access to Nexus Lexis through my university. I teach at Cal State San Marcos, which is this awesome school in North San Diego, and so it's a great bookend because I was kind of in the midst of the project when I got there, and now we're screening it in its 20th year anniversary as I'm exiting.
And by the way, I forgot to mention, congratulations on 20 years, but also restoring it. So part of the restoring process, was that something because of newer tech that you restored it, or is this something just to say, this documentary is relevant for today and we need to get it out there again?
Well, what happened was that format-wise, it was unable to play on some of the streamers like Apple and places like that. So I brought it to my friend who's a wizard. He just did the Billy Joel doc, and he does the color and the tech on like making sure everything's legal, but mostly color these days. And he did an amazing job of restoring and sharpening it, and also making it so it's friendly for all the streamers, where we'll eventually arrive. Hopefully, featured just on one of them, but we'll see what happens. So that would be, beginning of next year, end of this year, something like that.
That's so cool. Some of the things, it's interesting because the documentary I did in college was about the 1979 Greensboro Massacre. And it was, I went to UNC Greensboro, and I'm from the New York area. I grew up in Montclair, New Jersey. And so when I came down south, I heard about that story. I was, 5 years old when it happened, but it really enraged me, and then saw how the city kind of handled it. So I was very young with emotions, and I dove into it. And the point I'm making about this was the only equipment I had was SVHS. And
Right.
I learned on the fly, and I did it all. Really good story. I'm proud of it, but the production value was awful. And I remember HBO reached out to me, and they were interested in it until I told them, what I got, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we can't do anything with that." So I understand about like the mistakes you make when you first do it, and it's amazing these days, the technology and the kind of equipment that everybody has access to now.
Yeah, this was less of a mistake than that the formats grew up.
Yeah.
We were using the best. I mean, the version that we screened in theaters in 2005 and on Netflix actually in 2005 was the best of that era. I mean, not necessarily this. The source material was what it was, but I'm a fan of actually when the source material looks kind of rough. It's more fun, like the Portapak black and white video. I mean, if I was gonna do the restore again, I would have worked with Ken Srolnik on making that even more grainy and weird.
And by the way, the fair use doctrine, it helps so many documentary filmmakers tell their story.
Well, fair use is so misunderstood. It's incredible. As a teacher, I know that my students are like, "Oh, well, you can use 5 seconds or less of a song." I was like, "I don't think that's true. There's nothing about time. It's a lawyer question, and that's one of the few things you really should spend a little money on, is finding someone who could explain. But basically, are you using this footage to transpose its meaning and critique society? So if you take a copy of All in the Family and you just slap on an intro and outro, no, that doesn't really count, and that's also impinging upon their commercial potential. Whereas if you take, a scene of Archie Bunker when they firebomb his house because they think he's Jewish, and you're doing a documentary about Jews in America, it's very probable that you could use it there. So yeah, fair use
Perfect. Well said.
is
Yeah.
yeah, fair use is an amazing thing that we so far have in this country. Although the press is certainly being beaten up right now, but it's a great law. It's not even a law; it's a set of practices. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So when you started this documentary, what were some of the branches that started going in a different direction, or did they go in a different direction?
I mean, we knew what we read in the book, but one of the things I was musing over recently was all the people who we shot who didn't wind up in the film. You right? So it's going to be a very different film depending upon who you feature, you know. So like one child at Black Bear, who's a really good guy I've been in touch with, he was like, "Oh yeah, I remember we couldn't use my footage because there was those airplanes flying by." So I was like, oh, I don't remember, but damn, usually you're supposed to stop shooting then. Maybe I said that. I don't know. But um, it's that's would have been another film, and there's a bunch of people. We had at one point another main participant in the film, and we were like, well, we can't lose her. She's fantastic. And then we took out her stuff just to try it, right? The beauty of nonlinear editing. If you've come from SVHS, you know the pains of linear editing. Oh my God.
I sure do.
I would always leave like a few minutes at the beginning of my tapes because it's like, for those who don't know, it's like making a mixtape. It's like you're going from one tape to the other, so it's linear. So it's sticky because I always wind up adding more at the beginning than I planned on. So anyhow, once we cut her out, it was like, oh, now it makes sense. They have these rough cuts. I like to do a lot of community and filmmaker screenings, and we showed to some amazing people. Our editor, Michael Taylor, has gone on to cut like 100 films, including the new
Wow.
Julia Lokta film about Russia and the media. And Michael brought in people like Alan Taylor, who directed The Sopranos, and I don't know how Michael Almereyda wound up there, but some great filmmakers came by and just regular people, and we would do test screenings. And at the beginning, it's just a mess. So we took out this
It,
one character, or not character, participant in Black Bear, and then all of a sudden it started making more sense.
so how did you construct this? Was this more about going through the archival footage and then understanding what you need to do, with modern day? Like it kind of formed the questions for that, or was it you started interviewing the people, while you were doing it at the same time?
Well, I don't know if I was doing this at that point, maybe not, but I think the most important thing about interviewing is listening. Um, so I tried to do as much of that as possible, not step on their lines, and not come in with a list of questions like do your research and know what you're talking about, but basically follow their path. So that's what I tried to do, follow where they were going. Like as a professor, I've had students, make documentaries and they do the interviews, and then they don't even hear what the person's saying. They're just prepping their next question. We've probably all experienced this when you go to a Q&A for a film or something and you're so ready to ask a question, you don't even hear what's happening, and then you realize, oh, somebody just asked that a few minutes ago. So I tried to
And
listen, and if I could find some kind of conflict, great. Not with me and them, but that they had. But luckily, the Black Bear Ranch was like a school, and it was. I thought I wanted to film this because and tell this story because it was almost like a catalog of all the ideas and movements of the '60s in one place. So that's what happened. And people had told their stories, I think, before. So not everybody. I don't think Cecilia had told hers about the cult that comes along. So that was hard. Um, and as you know, Andy, like when you do these documentaries, most of the really good stuff is when you think the camera should be off, or when before and after the shoot. So I like to tell my camera people, I'm going to say cut, and it's the official cut, but keep rolling a little bit and let's see what happens. Um, And then those moments that are really hard and emotional, and some people will be like, "Oh, we can't show that," but that's off. Not that you're, you know, exploiting that, but if it's important and it's emotional, that's key.
A lot of times, those like really, this is what I figured when I'm doing interviews and talking to people is the first time they talk about it, they kind of, you could see them thinking in their answer about what took place. And then towards the end of their answer, they kind of summarize, it's a little bit cleaner. So yeah, those things are extremely valuable to allow them to kind of finish that. And I love what you said about, you know, um, listening. It's a very important part because, especially as a documentary filmmaker, sure, you have questions about this whole thing, but it's really about having a conversation with the person so that you could build rapport, they can get involved, and then they feel more relaxed, and those answers start flowing. And what I noticed is that I laughed because one of the first interviews I realized this. The former mayor of Greensboro, who just passed away, and I don't mean any ill will about him, but
Okay.
he talked down to me about the 1979, Greensboro massacre because I was so young. And when I left that interview, I thought I did a terrible job. And then I went into editing and I saw that I was like, oh, he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to the audience. And then when it played, everybody disliked him. And it was just,
Wow.
so it played a major role in that. And the whole point of this was saying about like what you said about listening and also, connecting with people.
Yeah, and also just to follow up on what you're saying, your own judgment of what happened might not support what's actually on in the footage. Like
So
it might
how
be a
did
lot
you,
better than you think.
yeah, absolutely. And how did you, when you're learning about this documentary and also about, what took place, what were some of the major moments of the film that you're like, oh man, like that really kind of, brought you in?
Well, certainly, Cecilia talking about her growing up at Black Bear and then going into the Shiva Lila, that was like, ooh, it's hard. It's hard. It was brave of her to talk about it, and it was hard to deny the power in that.
Yeah, I mean, that honestly, for me, that was like the moment of the documentary that just kind of really, you know, grabbed me in. What was about the Black Bear Ranch that really just got you interested, saying this is a story we need to tell?
The fact that it just encompassed every aspect of the 60s and the counterculture into one place. So one week it would be we're all vegetarian, or 1 month, and there'd be a manifesto. But because it was anarchistic and it wasn't like any kind of religious or spiritual trip, because of that, they were able to sustain over time, I think. But the idea that you could go to one place and have a story told that shows so many different issues, and admittedly fleetingly, like there's a minute or two on feminism, there's a minute or two on this, there's a minute or two on goat herding. I don't think the goat stuff made it, but at one point there was a big goat discussion argument. But I think that I feel that like if it's encouraging people to talk about how we live our lives, then we've succeeded. So, we were screening the film here in upstate New York the other night at a great theater called TSL, Time Space Limited. And afterwards, we got into a discussion. It became like, well, what does government really do? Because the film cuts both ways, left, right, middle, every way. Because right-wing people want to live off in the woods too and know how to fix their cars. Probably are better at it than the lefties. I do notice that. It used to be. I'm hoping it's still that way. It's a pretty friendly neighborhood we're in here in sort of the country. But when your car breaks down, it's not like the dude in the Subaru going to his yoga class. It's like the HVAC guy who like stops and picks you up. Usually
Yeah,
more
that's
right
true.
wing. Usually more on the
Yeah.
right side, right political spectrum. So anyway, my point. I'm meandering. My point is that I think these ideas are important for everyone. I really did want to show the film or share the film with the right side of the podcasting spectrum, but I'm kind of done. As you can tell, I'm starting to get a little done because we've been so successful at talking about the film on the podcast. It's really been a gift, you know. So I hope that people can find it. We're doing a whole run in California in September, in the Bay Area and LA and Ojai. And then we shall see what happens. But Commune the movie is the .com is the website, or Facebook or Instagram
Okay.
to follow up on our exploits. Yeah. So yeah, and so I spoke to some of the people recently, and they're like, "I'm old now." I'm like, well, you sound the same, you know. So getting some people have passed. Getting people to theaters when they're older is a little harder. I really wish the film could be found by younger populations. I suspect they have, because at one point, 2 points, it would have been available for free on YouTube, not with my
Hmm.
agreement. There's an understanding, misplaced understanding that, well, it's media, it should be free, right? Like, well, no, we made it, and we either will say if it's free or not. This isn't communism yet here.
Yeah, throw that in there, please. I love how you opened the movie where a driveway full of like, abandoned cars and broken down cars, and then those two individuals who are drinking beer. And it reminded me of the South, like talk about stereotypes.
I'll tell you a story if you want to hear a story.
Yeah, we don't want to hear
Now,
a
this
story
is
that's going to
this.
last all week.
Oh, yeah, that's Haas. He's a Kuruk Indian, or I think he's part Kuruk or all Kuruk, which is a tribe. And that was his buddy. Don't remember his name. And no, they were instrumental in the story in that they taught Black Bear people how to deal with things like the winter and building. You know, they were mentors who appeared for them. So, but I thought it was fun opening with that because it looked great and it was just not what you'd expect for a film about a commune. You know,
Absolutely, it was
two guys
fantastic.
drinking beer in a near a broken down porch. You know, like, okay, where are we going here? Yeah, right. Keep them curious.
And they always tell the best stories too.
Oh yeah, no, those guys are great. I mean, it's hard to imagine how rural it was and still is. You know, but one thing that did happen that's intriguing is that it was a nightmare for them back in the day. But when the film came out in 2005, Jerry Garcia had just died. So there's these wandering bands
Oh,
of deadheads who didn't know where to go. So I guess some of them had seen the film, and so a trove of people came to Black Bear. Somebody recently was like, "You don't know how many people came down the road when your movie came out." So I've been asked to say that if you want to go there now, you can, but you gotta get on their website, which I believe is blackbearranch.org, and just write a paragraph or two about it, because when you dealing with these under the radar, off the grid places, sometimes ne'er do wells want to go there and hide out. You know.
yeah. So something that I want to dive back in just a little bit to the documentary. So building trust with the subjects is very essential, and sometimes tricky. Were there any stories or moments that helped you break the ice or deepen relationships with the commune members?
I think there was an assumed familiarity on my part, in that I, had a lot of common values with them, and I was a baby boomer. I am a baby boomer, but the very last of it. So they were kind of like older brothers and sisters, you know. So I
Yeah.
took it, I took it like that, and everybody felt pretty they just seemed familiar. So I don't know. It was just
No,
assuming of familiarity or something like that. Yeah.
that
I
makes
mean,
sense.
yeah, and some
And
people didn't
s-
didn't want to talk, but I think most people were fine with it.
so, is there a significance in releasing it now? Did the passage of time change your perspective, or is its message still relevant today?
Well, originally it was like the tech thing, like, uh oh. we can't show it on Apple TV. What are we going to do? We got to like reformat the screen shape, you know, and the pixel count and whatever. And so in the process of doing that, I'm like, well, look at what's happening in this country right now. A lot of people are not in favor of the kind of totalitarian direction that's happening. So I think it's much more important now to see some real alternatives. You know, the question always was, are we running away or are we running towards, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting for me, like watching this and about current lifestyle. Like I'm tired of, like you live in if you live in California, it's really expensive and it's
Right.
happening everywhere. And there's some really popular YouTube channels like the Van Life. That's always very popular. And there's one guy who bought a mining town called in Sierra Gordo in California. It's like in the desert, like kind of outside of Death Valley. And he transferred it. He's doing a YouTube thing where it's absolutely fascinating. He's changing the whole thing, making it kind of like a town that's welcoming people. And his viewers are coming over, helping him restore it, putting it together. And so there's a lot of people online who are looking for different lifestyles. So, you know, commune is more about community, but also everybody with the same kind of mentality. But I feel like there's a lot of people that are just disenfranchised with what, you know, America is today as far as living and lifestyle. So I do see how relevant like your documentary could, you know, help people because it was a different time back then. But it, especially the social differences between people. Could you talk a little bit about that? I think the thing that was fascinating with me was like how the men and women kind of like were doing their things, but then also with the kids was the really interesting part. Could you talk about that a little bit?
I mean, again, it's if can't emphasize enough how it was like kind of a anarchistic place. So they may be a manifesto on Thursday, but like 2 weeks later, that everybody might be blowing that off. You know? I don't know what to say except that they were experimenting with all kinds of things. Luckily, I didn't hear anything about any child abuse or anything like that, which is, you know, it's like, I don't know, it's probably the same in communal situations as it is in, you know, nuclear households, you know, that sort of thing. So there was an attempt on the kibbutz life in Israel for people to have the children all live together and separate them from the parents. You know, there was that whole thing of the reimagining of what it means to raise children. And Dr. Spock had written that book, you know, coming out of the 50s, right? It was a whole nother thing. So they, you know, it reminds me of the film, you know, the film The Wild One, which is Marlon Brando. It's set in Hollister, California during the riots, the Hollister riots, motorcycle riots, and based on an article. And the cop says to Brando, or his character, you know, what are you kids fighting against anyway? And he says, what do you got? So that's kind of the ethos, I think, of anything. Or what are you up against? You know, they were up against everything, particularly the war. This was a point when young men were being shipped off to Vietnam to kill women and children and others, you know, who may or may not have been guerrilla fighters. So a lot of people didn't want to do that. And I think the government learned a hard lesson on that about what media they allowed, what they allow media makers to show, although it's harder now because phones and cameras are so ubiquitous. But yeah, it was a wild and crazy time, and it's hard to encapsulate it into one, you know, pat sentence or anything. But I think that there's always an element of confrontation or conflict when you have 20 or 50 people all with a different idea of how they're going to change or transform the world, you know.
I have a couple of questions, and one is about like today, this day and age where you know, I don't know, we probably share the same feelings about where we are in this country, but I'll just say what I feel. You know, it's hard watching our country go through this period right now. And I'm married to a Ukrainian woman, and she keeps telling me, she's like, this is how, it starts. This is the exact same thing Russia does. And I keep going, I get that, like, especially you've seen it firsthand. But this country, we do revolutions, we fight back. And right now we're kind of like stunned and we don't know what to do. Like, do you see, someone who's lived through that time, like, do we still have that as a country to kind of go through that again, kind of fighting back, pushing back about like what our government is doing?
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the reason I wanted to get the film out there. Dissent and up against the machine. I mean, a lot of people are protesting in the streets, and that's important. And you see that at Black Bear too, like Ocean Newman at the convention in 1968, and a lot of the people were involved in more creative ways of protesting, like Peter Coyote and the Meme Troupe and the Diggers in San Francisco, kind of history of San Francisco before hippies almost. So these early people were there doing their protests as street theater to a degree. And Elsa claims that, and I believe her, that Bill Graham worked with them, and that is a fact, I believe. And she's like, he got the idea of making rock concerts from us, because she was in the city doing these, what would you call it, kind of art/rock shows. So one of the things I'm reading a book right now, and I was quoting Abbie Hoffman, who was a counterculture guy from the 70s, steal this book, and he wrote that it's what starts as a movement then becomes a fad, and then the fad becomes commercialized. So that is the machine that destroys dissent.
So
fun.
tell me about the previous documentaries and leading into this. How did those kind of shape you into doing this one?
Well, I thought that I would make fiction films, and I still have that idea, but there's so many damn fascinating real life stories that I got kind of distracted. But I try to bring that energy of fiction film storytelling into the docs. Well, the first film was about the Russian baths in New York. So, common thread might be like off the grid, under the radar, secret society. So, the Russian baths started off as this like proletariat country club, because people didn't even have, if they had a bathtub in their apartment in the Lower East Side, which was, a giant ghetto, it was filled with dishes or something. So people would go to the bathhouse. The immigrants, it was a tradition from Russia, and they would gather together and talk, and so I thought that was fascinating. I went there. So the only real thread is that it has to fascinate me, but it does seem to involve counterculture stuff. That's called the Schwitz, which means sweat in Yiddish, or refers to the place. Then and that's available out there. And then I did a film about my childhood friend who is bipolar, who robbed banks. And that was pretty edgy because, some people are like, hey, you're showing bipolar people in a bad way. I was like, well, I'm not showing anyone anything. This is my friend and his story when he jumps his parole and comes to New York to visit me and comes off his drugs. And there's a real unraveling there. And that was with public TV. And it was on public TV stations and on Sundance Channel. And then I did Commune. Then I did a film about George Van Tassel. Is part 2 of the California story, and that's called Calling All Earthlings, also out there pretty readily. And that is about an early UFO contactee. I would say alleged, because I don't have any proof that he actually met with aliens, but it's an amazing story because he, in a way, was the first counterculture figure that I could think of, in a way. An early one in California, working for like the working for the airlines, allegedly for Howard Hughes and for a bunch of people, and decides to chuck it all and move to the desert and starts meditating by this giant rock, and then has an encounter with aliens. And so the film is like looking at his story, but also at the story of the people who were living there when I filmed it, which was like before Joshua Tree really blew up real estate wise. You were asking on Commune why it might be important. Another thing is that real estate has become so corporatized that the rents that we were paying, when people were paying $800 or $900 for a monthly rent, which to me is about what you should be paying, and they're now paying $2,500 because corporations have taken it over or people got greedy. So that's another reason why I think the film should come out now, to give people other alternatives on how to live. And then lately, I've been working on a film about a idea that the former owner of the LA Dodgers had to build a gondola, like an area, like a ski lift almost, from Dodger Stadium to Union Station in Los Angeles. And the only problem is it's going to go by the houses of like senior citizens and through Chinatown, and possibly turn Chinatown into a giant parking lot for what really, in my opinion, amounts to no more than a tourist ride, you know? So there is a group of people called Stop the Gondola. We've been following them, and we continue to ask, the pro-gondola side to be in the film, but they feel they won't get a fair shake. But they'll get a fair shake if they're in it. I would treat them, as a dramatist, I would treat them with extra respect, because I'd want their story to be super powerful. Because, one of the people involved in it says this is a great symbol of green, of being green, It doesn't it's a gondola, it doesn't use gas. It just gets you to the stadium.
But there's like how documentaries portraying a lot of the popular ones like on TV, where you see this, for example, like Tom Brady, where it's very one-sided. Like, how do you feel about modern day documentaries as far as it being more of like either, very one-sided, rather than what you experience of what you put out there, where it's, you want that balance. You need that balance in order to tell a fair story.
Well, what you're talking about is definitely a phenomenon in modern documentary, and it is is that a word for it? It's a word when you write a story that's flattering to the person. I can't remember it, but those are paid for by the production companies, usually, of Tom Brady, or maybe of, I don't know about the Billy Joel film, but typically that is that's a trend over the last 5 or so years, where it's huge budget. You're going to get a beautiful looking film, but it's only going to be made with, the approval of Beyonce or whoever the film is about. So that's not documentary filmmaking as I know it. I'm coming from the New York school of Al Maisels and people like that. And there's no narration, and film's not bought by anyone. In fact, on the new project, just to avoid any potential for issues, I'm not showing the cuts to anyone involved on either side. It's more like journalism. So I'm not a fan of documentaries that are, glorified commercials for the person. And sometimes they can be really good, but it's not independent. Ideally, I'm doing independent verite style documentaries with some interview stuff in there as well. Verite means I think, like fly on the wall.
And I think your documentary, I mean, it's fantastic. Commune is such a really interesting story, really well balanced with all the interviews from the archival even up to the present day when you did it. Connecting the stories together, like you said, no narration, and there's a few points where you have to have titles on the screen to kind of give an understanding about the time period of what's going on. And I get that. I love it. So I really applaud you for that kind of work, and those are the kind of documentaries that have really touched my heart. I don't like doing narration, and sometimes it's necessary if you can't get those interviews or it's really important. And the last thing I want to touch on is I like to do something called Now What? And a lot of it has to do with documentaries or people that put out something that is a message, or there's something that we can do as either viewers or people in society. And a lot of times when you see documentaries, let's say, Inside, I think it was called Inside Job, about, the financial crisis. It's like, I see all this stuff and I'm like, well, what do I do with this? Like, just watching and telling people it's not going to change things. So that's what I kind of want to kind of get. So for you with this documentary is like, now what? What can we do as viewers or people who watch it?
After you watch this film, I would say discuss it, share it, invite your friends over for a screening, talk about the ideas in the film. One of the ways, because I have to always write these things for school, justifying my existence. But the good thing, and it's like writing a grant, as you probably know, Andy, you probably wrote a few. It's not a bad process because it forces you to really think about it. So one of the things that I do is re-examining history and, and saying, wait, maybe it wasn't this way. Maybe it was another way. Like maybe there were so many successes from that era that we just take it for granted. So, what was like considered your weird cousin in Marin who only ate brewer's yeast or whatever is now like, oh, well, yeah, I ate brewer's yeast. I got it at Whole Foods. It's all being kind of brought into the system, like we were saying before. So I would like people to walk away with just taking a fresh look at some of the ideas in the film, which include, feminism, child rearing, community, if not communal living, living off the grid, all kinds of stuff, sexuality, monogamy, polygamy, all the other ones. Working with indigenous people. Not judging?
And not, yeah.
I think that what happened was that the whole communal thing was so tinged with, this was like the first film to come out about communes and cults and all that. So it's nice to be the first modern film, as far as I know. It's hard to move forward without looking back because history does repeat itself, like you were saying about. Yeah, I think your partner isn't wrong, but I think it's already well started. That's what's scary. The whole march towards totalitarianism, like we saw a few years back in Hungary, maybe we're closer to that, but Russia too. This is probably why Trump loves Russia so much. It's a good role model for him.
Yeah.
So
the rise of the oligarchs.
The oligarchs. So yeah, well, we have our oligarchs too, right? So the first film dealt with California communal life, community, all that kind of sociology, anthropology. The second one dealt with spirituality in a way, because UFOs and meditating and all that, calling all earthlings. And this one's really about politics, like right in there with that one story of this kind of band of working class kids up against the billionaire, which is classic documentary fodder. I've just never done it.
And you mentioned you're starting a new documentary. Are you in the middle of it, or just started kicking off like pre-production?
Yeah, it's called Gondola, and that's the thing that would take you from Union Station to Dodger Stadium.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and,
you did mention that. Sorry.
So it's a hot topic that got a little bit waylaid by all the other hot topics like fires and National Guard in LA, as is a lot of things happening in LA. But people. It's really a story. If it's just about the one place, right? If Commune was just about the Black Bear Ranch, I don't think it would fly as much. But really, I think people are able to see themselves in it. So I hope that, and I plan on engineering it so that the film is talking about who decides the fate of their communities, especially in the inner cities, Like, do they just get to slap down a mall, or does the community have input? How does it work, And that area is particularly sensitive to that because they threw people out of their houses bodily in the mid-century in order to make the stadium. Originally, it was going to be a housing project, and they didn't do the housing project. They made stadium. So the area around Dodger Stadium is very sensitive about all this for good reason.
Yeah.
And now another Dodger-associated person is coming back to put another nail in the coffin, possibly, or provide a sustainable transport system. Depends how you see it.
I look at how this country has changed the last 30 years and it's been planned. This didn't just happen in the last 4 years or since Trump took office. This has been planned for years, and they're executing it masterfully. And I hate saying that. And, you know, we need to get kicked in the ass to get back and do something to, you know, change these things. And it's making it more difficult because they're aligning all the systems in their favor. So it's going to be a real tough fight. But I appreciate what you do. And I think we need to have more of those hard conversations on podcasts, but also, you know, with people on the other side. We need to come together, because that's the other thing at this time and age is we're so divided, and it's by design.
Right. And, you know, a lot of times it's more fun together. Sometimes you want to hole up and read a book and be left alone, and I get it. I can get that, but mostly it's good to be around people. So just because you can get Amazon to deliver your packages and you could call up any movie ever made, doesn't mean you should. You might want to look around, go to that weird theater on the edge of town, see what's playing, and find the co-op that's selling the natural foods and avoid Whole Foods, which there's a lot of crap too. But they do. They have a lot of skanky food there. Anyway,
well, Jonathan, thank you.
That's what I got.
Thank you so much for your time, man.
Thank you, man. It's been fun.
Where can everybody find you and what you're working on? Is there a site where we can follow you or social media?
I think if you go to, I'm going to try it right now, Commune the movie, it takes you, you'll see the picture of the two kids, that's Commune. But yeah, it has the other work in there too, and a contact. It says, want to make a movie, because, you know, we're looking for a executive producer for the Gondola film, which, you know, it's about inner city people being able to determine their own fate, or any community, really.
I'd like to thank Jonathan Berman for joining Talent Freaks and sharing his insights. Just a reminder, Commune, the acclaimed documentary chronicling the story of Black Bear Ranch, is out now and playing in select theaters nationwide for a special 20th anniversary restoration run. This is a rare opportunity to experience a film on big screen and join in on important conversations about collective living, history, and creative community. To learn more and find tickets, be sure to visit firstrunfeatures.com/commune. The link is also in the episode description. Don't miss a chance to see the film, and please share it with your friends. If you'd like to get to know my work, visit talentfreaks.com to see some of the videos that I've worked on, as well as photography that I'm currently doing and so much in love with. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast, as well as hit subscribe, like, and the bell. It truly helps others discover these incredible stories. And if you have suggestions for future guests or topics, feel free to reach out. I'm always eager to bring in new and exciting conversations to the podcast. Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating, and stay curious.